the blood!
From the moment you boot up BioShock, you can feel the story grab hold of you. A plane crashes at sea, a mysterious lighthouse, a sprawling city beneath the ocean. Hooking the player from the first touch without overwhelming him with convoluted RPG mechanics was key to the success of the game and the skillful ramping up of BioShock's legendary gameplay. BioShock has an amazing opening sequence that I can't imagine the game without it, with the plane and sort of the crash. But I understand that didn't come online until like the very end of development. Sean, is that true?
We had a couple of really depressing playtests. We had built all these systems. We thought we were doing a good job of like giving basically people a playground to play with and things to do. And when we had a playtest, we didn't realize how bad of a job we were doing in exposing those systems to the player, because we were so in these systems and in our own heads, we had no idea that we just weren't facing them towards the player at all. So after that playtest, we took a long, cold look at what we were doing and realized that we had to we were confident enough in the systems that they were going to be fun and meaningful to the player, but we really had to think about how we were going to introduce these systems to the player, and in such a way that they understand why the systems were there. Like, you can't ship a README file with the game and expect people to read it. Like, it has to be part of the experience. So the challenge is, how do you introduce people to these systems, but do it in such a way that it fits within the narrative? So we had to integrate all of these things into the story cleanly so that the player felt like it was one smooth experience. And I think the zap 'em and whack 'em thing was one of those.
And the 1-2 punch.
Yeah, the 1-2 punch that came out of that.
The plane sequence at the beginning, I heard a story that like a programmer put that together in like a day or two, and it was a very last minute thing, right?
So we had done a focus test, and we had it was one of the most depressing experiences in my life, because we were very close to being finished, and it was basically giving people what essentially became the demo, and people played it, and it was in Boston, and we were sort of behind these glass windows. All these sort of Boston guys are like, this is a wicked piece of shit. They hated it, and they were making fun of it, and they were saying, it's like watching some guys and dolls beating each other up, and it's the stupidest thing they've ever seen. And we thought we were in pretty good shape at that point. And I remember the focus test guy was like sort of like a doctor giving me the bad news. Sorry, Ken, you better get your affairs in order.
Right.
And we all came into work the next day, and we were like, what are we going to do? And we're all pretty depressed. But I think we started talking. And as we talked, we started thinking about, what are they saying to us? What are these people saying to us? We think there's something there. How are they missing it? And we decided that maybe they didn't understand who they were and who their role as a character, who their role in the world was, because the game at that point started with you in the ocean, floating in the ocean after the plane crash. And
the crash still was in the fiction, it just wouldn't show.
You just didn't see it, so you didn't have the voiceover saying, my parents always said I was going to do great things or whatever that. They didn't show the plane crash. We didn't establish a time period. Because the plane is critical to establishing. You're smoking a cigarette. It's very 1960s looking. All that stuff was established. It wasn't established. So we decided we had no time and no money so we sort of came up with a script. I wrote some lines, a line, I think. Nate, one of our artists, recorded the line. Steven and Sean and those guys got to work on building this very simple sequence, which was relatively simple sequence. And then the plane crash actually happens over the BioShock logo we already had. But we wrote a radio play behind that with, altitude of the crash. And that, I think, set the emotional, and the people screaming in terror on the plane crash, that set the emotional tenor much better and explained who the player was. And all of a sudden, we released, then I think the next real encounter we had was people playing the demo, public encounter, and all of a sudden it was a very different experience.
No, I remember even back in the day, I think we did a thing on TV where you kind of talked about it, and it was like that night, and I remember that night, like people on the forums were just like going nuts. And even though the game had, I think, had a lot of press attention, when people finally got to play it and go through that sequence, I just remember there was this mass sort of excitement around it. And then the game shipped only a few weeks after that, right? Or a month after that?
A week later, or a few days later.
It's amazing, like, now to hear that, like, literally, like, a month before the game came out, like, the playing sequence came online or something. I mean, it was that late. Right?
We still had to go through certification and all that.
Yeah, so it's like within,
It wasn't far. It wasn't far. It was really last minute. And it was one of those things where, like, you really shouldn't be putting in content that late. Yeah. But we felt we were so close to having something good that we just rolled the dice on it, and we worked really hard on it. Like we worked really hard. I remember how much time I spent on just that recorded of altitude. I could still hear the different version of that in my head. Because we spent so much time on that stuff, and these guys were working on getting the animations right and the
scene was shot in engine, but we decided to pre-render it so that we had to do less QA on it.
Right.
It wasn't going to be some like weird streaming error or crash error. Wow. It was just like, we're just going to show the video, yeah.
And it's interesting because once you start in the ocean, we had this experience of testing a lot with the water effects and how beautiful Steven's water effects were. People didn't realize they were out of a cutscene at that point. And so they would just sit there and stare, and then they pick up the controller. And they pick up the controller, and all of a sudden they realize they were controlling things. But that, as Sean said, that part of the plane is not actually interactive. It was done in the engine, but we just filmed it.
Now, as people were playing through the game and you were testing it, I'm sure there was debate about, when would you introduce this plasmid, what would the ramp be? Did that change at all, sort of as you got towards the end of development, about like, we're going to give people the gun at this point, or it's like, we're going to trigger these plasmids at this point? Like, how did that work?
So, like, we moved guns around. Like, for instance, there was a big debate about, originally you found a gun in the lighthouse, a pistol in the lighthouse.
Oh,
at the very
right
beginning.
there, yeah.
And because it's a shooter, right? Like, what the hell? And we had a lot of debates about it, and I feel that it was important that we didn't do that, because the fact that you sort of go through a lot of the experience without having the distraction of a gun is important to getting you immersed in the world. Because when you have all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But you don't have the hammer, so you just sort of had to take in the world and have that feeling of fear. And like, I know when you saw that splicer bounding around on the ceiling, that you couldn't do anything about it, and that had even though that's
those are those moments, right? Like I remember when I played Unreal for the first time, where it's like you're trapped and there's a monster and you can't do it, and the lights go out. It's like that's the moment with the splicer where you're like, I want to do something but I can't, and that evokes an emotion.
I remember we kept, moving where the machine gun appeared around and where various plasmids appeared around. It was a real. It's a real fine-tuning process.
Yeah, and it gave us an opportunity, like especially with the shotgun, to really present the weapons, like put some space between them.
It's a moment when you finally.
Yeah, I think.
We get the shotgun Paul sequence.
Paul Hellquist was he put the sequence together for the when you see the shotgun laying in the pool of light. Like every game developer knows what that means. The minute you pick that thing up, something's going to happen. But it was still a very effective way, as I'm remembering it, to, look, I've been waiting for this thing, I'm going to pick it up, and now you have an immediate opportunity to use it. But, at the same time, we're trying to ramp up the tension level by having the splicers kind of on the outside of the light, so you can't really see them, and then coming in one at a time and attacking you.
Yeah. And we had very few tools to really control how the splicers acted. So how they were set up and how the environment was lit was really important.
There's even other things like when you get the TK plasmid, I don't think we had a lot of physical space and opportunity and time to really present that. So we came up with the narrative that, it was the doctor's office and he used TK to practice tennis. And we had the turret in there that threw tennis balls at you. So if you wanted to, you could catch the tennis balls and throw them, and you could knock things down. I think it revealed pickups that you could then, pull to yourself with TK. But we're always trying to think of like little backstories that we could do. It doesn't have to be as involved as the shotgun ambush. Sometimes it's just, let's take a grenade turret and turn it into a tennis ball turret.
Because we wanted, because I remember like the impulse was, I've been to dentist's office, and there's always some like weird aspect of the dentist personality they always want to get through their office. They always have to have their hobby featured in some way, and so we saw an opportunity there to both feature this, he's a tennis nut, and teach TK at the same time.
And the gods, they